Superman has hit the big screen yet again, and we'll have to wait with bated breath to see how well it'll fare in the long run. But as we look at DC as a whole, you'll see that it has made some of the best and worst entries to all forms of media in the last 90 years of its superpowered existence. From the greatest of print to the garbage, Oscar winners to Razzie acceptances, incredible gaming experiences to the most infamously terrible ever. And within the world of mobile gaming, we've seen a fair share of DC titles swing through its app stores, and much like Robin's, they've come and gone, either removed or still enduring. So let us mere mortals touch the gods for a brief moment and take a look at every DC game in release order that's still available within the Apple App Store. Now, to clarify, these are the ones that pop up on the official DC Games website and are still available on the App Store, for the moment at least. And stick around or jump to the end as I give them all a ranking as well.
Let's get this show on the road!
Hey guys! Need a hand?
With what? Parking?
Way before the Lego Batman movie, we had the Lego Batman games. And though the first was available on mobile, it no longer is. And so in the App Store, the titled Lego Batman DC Superheroes is actually confusingly a mobile version of Lego Batman 2 DC Superheroes, as it was known on consoles. So if you weren't wanting to lose your place in the convoluted timeline, I'm glad we could have set you right. And these Lego games are very much like the Lego sets they're inspired by. They're fun, you know what you're getting, there's lots to do, but they also can be tricky at points. They can be time-consuming and, more often than not, rather repetitive. So if you've ever played one of these titles before, it's very much the cookie-cutter treatment, and so it's the IP that really has to sell it. And here, you've got an extended roster of the DC universe, with scores of big hitters available to unlock or purchase. More on that later. This was the first LEGO game to feature a fully voiced dialogue, and Traveler's Tales managed to pull in the big hitters. We've got Troy Baker, Laura Bailey, Travis Willingham, Steve Bloom, Clancy Brown, Nolan North, and many more. And so it's a joy to watch and listen to the fully animated cutscenes brought over from the console games, as it starts off by setting the scene of Lex Luthor's presidential bid backed by the aid of Gotham's supervillain cohort, and the subsequent stopping of them by the Cape Crusader, his bevy of pals, and extended members of the Justice League. From everything so far, it looks like you're in for a fun ride. The problem is, the game then starts, and this is when you see what was truly lost in the process of porting. The graphics don't have the same shine as they do on console, and scenes aren't as populated, which is totally understandable. This was made back in 2013 when the iPhone 5S was out, and so some sacrifices for a smaller screen had to be made. But what brings down the whole experience is the pacing. What I thought was just a slow tutorial was in fact a precursor to a drudge through stale fights, backtracking, and unnecessary logic. It's known that these games are a collector's paradise, with the gorge of unlockables to glut on, and the way that's done is by collecting studs and filling up the stud meter to become a true hero. And you get these studs by destroying everything you see, which is fun to start, but tires very quickly, because everything is placed so far apart to give the sense of larger levels, and the native controls are really lacking. Combining movement and attacking gets frustrating after a while, and tapping on action points or trying to use your character's special skills can be infuriating when things don't register after you tap them. So you get tired of doing it and don't want to destroy everything inside, and instead just want to progress the story. Oh, but you can't, because you need to actually destroy certain random things to reconstruct them to be able to proceed. It'd be fine if there was just more life. Instead, it's picking weeds in a desert. But you've collected the studs, right? You've hit the story beats, but oh, the level isn't complete because there are certain objects that can't be destroyed without a specific character's power. So to unlock them, you need to spend the aforementioned studs, and how much does Superman cost? Now it shows you'll have to play the levels over and over and over again to get enough to unlock even just one character, or you can unlock them early by buying gold bricks with real money. And that's where the rub is. The game already costs £4.99, and now there are microtransactions to early unlock characters needed for gameplay. That sort of mechanic hasn't irked me in the past. Take the Resi 2 remake, where you can pay for early access to unlockable armory, which isn't necessary for completion, but here you need those characters with those specific skill sets to reach that 100% mark, which, if going through the avenue of not purchasing the microtransactions, to me, just stinks of a way to artificially inflate the playing time without much substance to keep you going. And so, yeah, there's plenty of nostalgia to be had, and it's always fun to control your fave characters, but when you find yourself playing to get to the joy of watching a cutscene and then the brief respite is over and you're back to the dull work of gameplay before the next one comes along, I think that's a good sign to move on.
Sorry to wipe that grin off your face, Joker.
We must stand up to this regime once and for all.
And someone on the flip side of what I've just been describing is Injustice Gods Among Us. Nothing suspicious here, except where, straight to the point, the story isn't present at all. If you're unfamiliar with the Injustice world, basically, the Joker kidnaps a pregnant Lois Lane, rigs a bomb to her heart stops, the bomb goes off, wipes out 11 million Metropolis residents, and then Superman punches a hole clean through the Joker's chest, and a civil war between superheroes begin as sides are formed and lives are lost. Compelling, right? You'd be forgiven if you didn't know any of that if you played only the mobile version of the NetherRealm beat-em-up, since any allusion to why former squadmates are beating seven bells out of each other is not hinted on at all. Instead, all you have is a fighting game where you pick a team of 3, being able to swap out between them at any time and building up enough hits to fill focus meters to unleash their unique specials. There are plenty of characters to choose from, and leveling up is a card-based affair where unlocking and collecting said cards helps build out your deck of playable characters. And with the many variants and costumes to be had, there are so many to try to aim for. And that overabundance is kind of its own downside. As though it may sound great to be able to unlock the Arkham Origins Batman to play as, or variants from the New 52 run of comics, because this is a free-to-play model, they're almost all locked behind paywall and purchasing of in-game currencies. You are able to earn those coins yourself through regular battling, but for some reason, the fighting is the least exciting part of the experience, which probs ain't best for a fighting game. We're in 2.5D, fixed camera, a plethora of compelling locales to duke it out on, but the actual controls? Tap to light hit, swipe to heavy, then engage in simple QuickTime events when it comes to the specials. There's no dodging, movement back and forth, though there is blocking by pressing both thumbs on the screen. And when you combine all of this together, it actually makes a Clash Amongst Titans rather formulaic. You can time your attacks and anticipate when you'll get hit back, know when to dodge, when to go in heavy, know when to use your focus, and after a while, there's no excitement. It's just going through the motions of leveling up to take on more powerful foes, to get more rewards, to get more upgrades, to complete the cycle yet again. It's surprising that the story was in fact omitted, as I think even the simplest of narrative frameworks would have made going through the repetition a little more palatable. And though there are limited in-game events that give some structure, they're just arbitrary slugfests to get an unlockable. And also, everything has this grim, dark, gritty reboot filter on top of it, which does absolutely fit in with the dark story of the Injustice universe, but how are we, the players, supposed to know that in this iteration? Instead, it just looks like everyone forgot to turn up the tint on their costumes, which definitely does the DC universe an injustice here.
Clock is running. We have liftoff.
Onto the first of our sequels, and we're returning back to blocky Gotham just to end up breaking the surly bonds of Earth and venturing into space, as LEGO Batman Beyond Gotham does exactly that. Takes you beyond Gotham. This is a mobile port of LEGO Batman 3, as known on consoles, and the thing is with sequels is you have to go bigger each time. LEGO Batman 2 expanded the roster, now 3 expands the landscapes, as we'll find ourselves building a rocket and heading to the final frontier to tackle extra-dimensional foes. The gameplay is very much the same as you would expect, and very similar to the other that was just covered, with some welcome improvements. The levels feel a little more populated, with there being much more of a sense of action and activity as opposed to the slower pace in the previous game. I think this is because the levels themselves are actually shorter and smaller than before, which is a great choice. When transferring from console, the open world mechanic had to be dropped for obvious hardware limitation reasons, and so rather than the first trying to give a sense of an open world by making bigger levels, it's best to shirk that and instead make more densely packed, smaller, bite-sized levels to keep the pacing going. The choice of controls controls for the touchscreen are mixed. The on-screen button layout is the best to play with, but does cover a lot of the seeable action, whereas the casual controls will give you the most uncluttered screen, but will have you tapping all over the place just to get something to happen, eventually blocking your own point of view as your hand covers the action just to move the Batman upwards. And though I've given some praise for the improvements in pacing, unfortunately there are some things that just drag on, namely the suit switching, which is a great concept to have Batman and the Boy Wonder be a walking utility belt for any occasion, but when you're having to switch out between each suit, and it's a fiddly thing to do when pressing the button and it doesn't register, so you have to keep on tapping to get it to work, it just slows things right down. And so sections requiring multiple skills consecutively can just come to a complete halt. Also, the activation boxes for certain special skills seem to be way too small, requiring exact accuracy to activate, which is difficult when you're using your finger and it's covering where you want it to go. But also, though the levels have more action and the boss fights seem more spectacular, some things in the level progression just aren't fully apparent. And I will admit that I had to resort to using online guides a few times in order to be able to progress. Maybe that's a skill issue on my behalf, or maybe it was just my patience wearing a little thin and wanting to get it over and done with so I can move on to the next section. But I feel that the charm of these LEGO games hold up best with greater processing power. And on mobile, they're a nice inclusion, but overall a missed swing. So if you're wanting to see the hype around LEGO getting their hands on seemingly every major IP, best to do it on a bigger screen with controller in hand.
Well, at least I wasn't scared.
No, you were proud of yourself, which is also an emotion.
Don't you know not to corner a wild animal? It's dangerous.
And let's put you in a cage.
Now, everything that I've said before about stories and narratives are paid back in spades here with the first of the games in the Batman Telltale series. If you're unfamiliar with Telltale, well, it's pretty much in their name. They tell tales. Their titles are tantamount to point-and-click adventures through visual novels, often having long stints of dialogue and animation with the occasional input to feel engaged, whether prompting a character to reach for something or choosing what to say. And I definitely haven't sold it well there, because these games are some of the most engaging experiences on the market. Straight off the bat with Batman, we're met with a recognizable world in a cel-shaded Gotham, with a heist underway to be stopped by none other than the Dark Knight. The action on paper is limited, just tapping in one place for the next scripted cutscene to play out, but it feels involved and makes you feel like you're actually countering and parrying more so than if you were to have full control of his motor functions. And once the action has been quelled, we're presented with a side of the Batman lore that has been explored more over the last 20 or so years, that being the politics and the human underground world of the city. A mayoral election campaign for Harvey Dent, backed by beneficiary Bruce Wayne, and already we're being drip-fed so much of the world that even casual DC perusers would see as foreshadowing. We're in the early-ish days of Batman. He's still out there making a name for himself, and the big players we meet, Dent, his new girlfriend Selina Kyle, Bruce's old friend Oswald, aka the Penguin, lay the groundwork for a sprawling story that plays out over 5 chapters, the first of which is free to play, the following 4 being up for purchase. And I don't want to give too much of the story away in case of spoilers, but this narrative definitely goes places you'll want to experience for yourself. Don't may seem like you're just going along for the ride, your choices have a greater impact than you know, with certain dialogue choices you make, or whether you shake hands with a mob boss or not. All of these will come back much later down the line, leaving you wanting to start over again to explore what other worlds split off from the simple tap of a gesture. But you can't have a game reliant on a narrative-heavy approach without it being structurally sound from the ground up, which is why Telltale pulled in some of the best talent to voice. You've got the big trio of Troy Baker, Laura Bailey, and Travis Willingham up front and center, expertly creating fully lived-in characters the way that they do. And it's a testament to the power of choosing your voice actors correctly. Dialogue is often just a filler in many games, a voice line to break up the action or music, but when you have a game with little action, that's the basket all your vocal cord eggs have got to go into. And I realize I keep saying that there's little action here. I'm definitely doing the game a disservice. There is still plenty you can do. There are portions where you control Bruce and explore his surroundings, choosing to learn more about the rich lore of this world or to learn of his apparent disdain of graffiti. I will say that these sections are a little janky in places, as the movement isn't the most fluid, which makes sense since controllable avatars are in fact a secondary requirement in these type of games, but with how everything else runs so smoothly and seamlessly, I'm sure we can overlook a jittery gate. Trust, if you want one of the most compelling and engaging comic book narrative experiences out there, you've got one waiting in the App Store, all packaged up and ready to go.
I'd advise you to be cautious. But I know you can't abandon a good mystery until it's solved.
And straight off the back of the last one is the next one, often considered part 2 in the Telltale series, titled Batman: The Enemy Within. Taking place after the events of the first part, you don't necessarily have to have played part 1 in order to enjoy part 2, made up again of 5 chapters, as the events are quickly summarized at the beginning as a little catch-up. But you may get more of an involved experience as the decisions and choices you've made in the first installment have direct effects in the gameplay of the second, as characters will remember the way you've spoken to them or actions that you've undertaken that have affected future outcomes, further deeply grounding the title as a lived-in experience as opposed to a throwaway game. And everything I laid praise on in part 1 is here as well. The incredible voice acting, the engaging storyline, the deep lore, but also the issues that I quibbled over have been ironed out for a much better experience. The graphics and playability have a marked improvement, with much smoother animations and controls, and the actions being a lot more fluid. It's definitely an engrossing game that pulls you in with its visceral, no-pulling-punches approach and invested storyline. You won't even realize that you've watched a whole scene play out without any interaction because of how brilliantly paced and acted it is. And the more hands-on sections, such as a brilliant detective stint in Chapter 1, makes you feel involved in a perfect balance between swaths of cinematic masterpieces. There's not much more I can say, except that these games may very well be the best and most involved Batman-related experiences you can hope to have. Definitely add them to your collection if you haven't already.
Goodbye, Bruce. Until next time.
I won't hurt you unless I have to.
You're gonna have to.
And now we come to the final set of sequels for DC games on mobile, and I'm rather thankful that they did, because Injustice 2 finally does the Injustice games some justice. All of the gripes and issues I had with Injustice 1 have been ironed out and improved upon here. We have a full story mode, with cinematics and voice dialogue pulled from the OG console cutscenes, giving it a perfect frame as to why Batman is beating up his son. The moves and controls have been expanded upon big time. I didn't know this would ever be a positive point, but now you can actually move your fighter across the screen, adding a whole extra layer of dimension and strategy for you to duck, dive, dodge, and wang a shield off someone's head from afar. On top of that, the move sets have been expanded, with additional specials tailored to each character that can be upgraded and cooled down over time. These do, in essence, replace the focus meter from Injustice 1, but the layout makes it feel a little more involved. And talking about layout, the simplest thing, the perspective on the camera completely opens up the game. Before, there was that static, semi-over-the-shoulder angle, which gives the sense that the fight is purely one-sided from the POV of your character, that the fight is only going one way toward your inevitable victory, since there's no world behind them that appears to exist. But by switching it slightly to just a straight-on side angle, all of a sudden the stakes are raised, as it gives a clear and balanced battleground where anything can go down. And speaking of that, the wall-breaking special moves are always a joy, even if after a while they get overplayed if you're spamming a main, but the theatrics of seeing how Batman claims he has a no-kill rule and then go completely over-the-top massacre using a fighter plane to take down a thug is a ridiculous joy. Outside of the fighting, you have the options to upgrade loot and gear, equipping them to your characters, whom you can also level up to give a slightly more tailored experience to your preferred playstyle. This is where the free-to-play model kicks in, as better gear and equipment can be purchased or pulled from loot boxes through in-game currency or real-life funds. It can seem a bit of an imposition, as these stronger items mean stronger beatdowns on your foes, but with a balanced playing time across all the different modes, one for resource collecting, but also because you're locked out of progression in one field until you make moves in another, you can easily build up your squad to a powerful level without needing any extra funds. All of that, plus a great varnish of graphics, dynamic animations, and fluidity of movement makes this the DC fighting game for mobile that you've probably always been looking for.
No more sleepovers for you! Woohoo! 100% awesome!
And now for something a little different. DC superhero girls Blitz is based off the eponymous TV show that ran for 2 seasons back in 2019, which is a bright, bubbly action series following some of the leading ladies of the DC world. Now, I never watched the show. Personally, I was more of a Teen Titans Go fan, so I didn't know if I needed any pre-acquired knowledge before jumping in. But thankfully, you're good to go if you want to pick it up, as the main core of the game is to complete some minigames, collect stars based on how well you've done, upgrade your base, then continue. When you start off, the minigames list is rather small, with each character having their own set of individual games that are represented via comic books. Collect said comic books by playing well, and you've got more games. And the thing is, when I started playing, I thought, oh, this is really easy. The game is for ages 4+, you know. But the more you play, the faster the games get. And it gets to a point where you're aiming and swiping, and it's way too fast for your fingers to compute, giving you a rather deceptively ridiculous challenge. The short pick up and play nature is fun, and married with the cartoony visuals, you can actually get really into it. It's just a shame that something darker lies beneath. For you see, when you start, you have both Batgirl and Bumblebee unlocked, with the rest of the squad standing in squalor in the corners of the cave. The only way to unlock them and the several minigames that they each have is to subscribe to the game for the cost of £19.99 per year. Now, I managed to unlock everything that I could, all available minigames, all available decorations for the cave, all alternate costumes, within 20 minutes of gameplay. And I'm sure other players would approach this with a bit more of a casual nature, but I can't see how a rolling subscription of £20 per year would give you ongoing worth to warrant that price. It seems to be one of those setups where they hope that you make the purchase to keep on playing, then in a year's time question why there's a £20 charge on your card as you've forgotten to cancel the subscription and the app hasn't been opened in 11.5 months. So I hope you'll forgive me for not spending the money to see what joys were awaiting me behind the paywall, but I'm sure the gals will be just grand doing what they're doing.
Oops!
Parademons on Earth. That can only mean one thing.
I'm gonna be late for my hot date tonight?
Would it really be a major franchise without a Match 3 tie-in? DC Heroes and Villains is this comic book universe's offering of the simple yet addictive Candy Crush mechanic, with a slap of high-stakes storyline on top to give you an engaging framework. A mysterious pulse has stripped away superpowers, and it's up to you to fight back a galactic threat by matching similarly colored tiles to attack any ne'er-do-wells. There's a surprisingly large roster of characters to choose from, each with their own different specials that can be used in the course of puzzling, all rendered in a rather pleasing art style that definitely helps to keep you around. Once you've assembled your team, you jump into the fray with a line of baddies at the top, and after utilizing a rock, paper, scissors mechanic to match the appropriate tiles together to inflict the most damage, you can chip away at health bars until your victory is ensured. And yes, I know this has been done in other titles, but what I like here is that enemies take up space in different columns, and only tiles matched within said columns will land any damage, adding an extra layer of strategy that you will always have to keep in mind, rather than just mindlessly creating any homogeny you see. And there's a surprising challenge cap as well. The waves of villains that roll through, or heroes if you choose to play as the Rogues Gallery in certain scenarios, will not only patiently wait for you to find a good combo to hit them with, but will also attack you back in turn, chipping away your own health levels. And once depleted, you're out of here. This is where it's essential to level up your characters, helping them upgrade and strengthen to get back into the fray. For a game with simple gameplay mechanics, there's a lot of depth, with party customization and enhancements turning it more into RPG territory, with combat being a bejeweled affair. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Match 3 games, yet I ended up playing this title longer than I thought I would, because the tile swapping mechanic wasn't the upfront focus. Instead, it was just a vessel for your heroes to fulfill their goal and to stop crying. On top of that, you can also duke it out in player versus player to show your skills, or lack of, against other real-life folk. And to just step away from the screen for a little bit and to look at the arc of mobile DC games as a whole, you can see that here we have fully departed from the more fully fleshed games that require a good sit-down session to get stuck into, and into more of the casual sphere where pick up and play for a few minutes at a time is all that's needed. So if you're more of in need of a quick dopamine hit while some obscure villains have got your back, well, you're in luck here.
Sounds like you capes have a world to save. Good luck with that.
This one, I gotta say, was an absolute surprise. I had no idea what this game was going into it. I'd seen the app icon before, but thought it might just be another squad turn-based combat game, but nope. Right here, we've got Vampire Survivors, but with Batman. Not like a Batman, which a vampire is, like the Batman. No vampiric qualities, just a cape and whatnot. You know what I'm on about. If you're this far into a video on DC games, you know where I'm coming from. This roguelite survivor will see you running around an open space, taking down hordes of enemies, collecting new powers, and powering up in hopes of making it through to the final boss. It's an interesting framework of the narrative in that you're working for LexCorp and are doing some tests and whatnot. And there are certain moves like Heat Vision, the Batarang, and Lasso of Truth that are clear indicators of the DC universe, but apart from that and the little pixel sprite you're controlling through a mild bullet storm, there's not really much that makes this a comic book based game. Sure, there are some specials that you get to use every now and then, like an oversized Batmobile to plow through the baddies, but the enemies and locations seem a little generic. And overall, though fun, it kind of seems like it's a survivor game that's popped up in the App Store and has just ripped the skins from another game and might be pulled from the store at any moment. But no, this is very much a DC offering, though the most DC part of it are these series of interactive videos within the app. Fully voiced and animated episodes that you can watch through, then vote on what would happen next. It's an odd mix of an app, to be honest. There's something that seems really sort of unofficial about it all, yet gives just enough to make you go, oh, okay, yeah, this'll scratch my comic book fandom needs. The Super Scroll, different universe, I know, just go with it, mishmash of seeing characters run around with different powers is fun, and the gameplay itself is surprisingly challenging. Not necessarily because of the fighting, but more of the survival, actually having to hold out for 10-minute rounds to then take down big bads. And if you fail, you have to go through the 10 minutes again just to hopefully unlock the next stage. It's a survivor's game that somehow, and I'm not sure how, is still managing to survive.
And this was getting ridiculous.
If you've been a devout watcher of this channel's vids within my tenure here, then you may have picked up that I'm a huge fan of Fallout Shelter. Mainly because, one, I'm a huge fan of the Fallout world, but also because of the base building mechanics. Now imagine how I felt loading up a Fallout Shelter-esque game, but within a franchise in which I own over 1,000 comic books of. You'd think I'd be over the moon, wouldn't you? Well, no. Sorry to disappoint. Which is what DC Dark Legion did as well. It starts off strong, don't get me wrong, as you nurse a wounded Wonder Woman and gear Green Arrow to renovate an abandoned Batcave after the world has succumbed to a disastrous mist that's turning people crazy. The individual rooms are themed nicely and in keeping with the world lore, and as you expand, you gain more recognizable faces, all of whom you can appoint to different jobs. I'm sure Black Adam just loves doing manual labor in a power plant. There are these little vignettes of dialogue full of humor and good writing, which helps to fill out the world. The problem is when you actually go out into the world. The design of the overworld seems like an afterthought, which is a shame since that's where most of the action takes place. The style reminds me of those games that pop up in forced ads whilst you're playing another game. You know the ones I'm on about. And as you explore around, there's not much to do, except collect some resources that pop up over the map, engage in bizarre little mini games, and then do a squad-based fight, which definitely isn't worth the effort at all. And the fact that everything is in portrait mode is an absolute kicker. I kept turning my phone and playing with the settings in hopes to expand it into landscape, which would be perfect for surveying the Batcave or to get the full screen combat action, yet the portrait persists, really removing a lot of fun from the experience and adding to an overall cheaper feel. And what's more, why you're playing the game is rather confusing. At times, you're just an unseen narrator observing the interactions between heroes and villains alike going about their day, and at other times, you're directly spoken to and mentioned. But considering you don't have an avatar, what place do you have within this world? Are people just going mad from the Batman Who Laughs maniacal machinations? And don't get me started just how rinsed the Batman Who Laughs is. Yes, it was an interesting character when first introduced, but my goodness how they've overused him. And it seems they just wanted to make a game with him as the main antagonist, and so just slap this one together as a showpiece. And look, I wanted to like it. I wanted to enjoy building a new Batcave and spend hundreds of hours in it like I have with fallout shelter, but the cheap animations, the thrown-to-the-side squad combat, and the arbitrary upgrading of bunker features that provide very little to the experience makes this a man who is not laughing. Because, you know, I mentioned the Batman who laughs earlier, and it's a play on that. Look, I don't know, I just want to get out of this particular section, okay?
Alfred says you never sleep.
Alfred used to be an actor. He can be a bit dramatic.
Says the guy dressed like a giant bat.
Take a nap, Oliver.
And now this is the final and most recent DC mobile game, literally coming out last week, timed to the release of the Superman movie and obviously wanting to capitalize on the DC hype. Worlds Collide is one that I had high hopes for. Just going off the animated cinematic, the art style looks fun and vibrant, and taking on the Otherworld syndicate made up of evil versions of our beloved main universe counterparts, it sets the scene for some interesting conflicts and sparring. The thing is, the game's terrible, and I kept playing it hoping that it was just teething issues at the beginning, but nope, it doesn't get any better. In fact, quite the opposite. After a brilliant opening cinematic, I came out of it carrying all this energy and looking where to put it, but the drab, generic squad-based gameplay was just not it. But forgetting that, the thing that's most egregious of all was that there was no voice acting. And many games don't have voiceovers, yes, but here it's a very, very obvious omission. The silence of the protagonist seems deafening. The fact they're moving their mouths in sync to the dialogue and animated with expressive gestures, I actually went into the settings to see if I'd accidentally muted voiceovers, but no, this was a design choice. And I don't want to keep harping on about it, but I genuinely haven't played a game before where it actually seemed like a genuine mistake to not have in-game spoken dialogue. And here in Worlds Collide, it reeks of a cost-cutting measure, and then you keep playing the game and realize there were a lot of cost-cutting measures. Let's not talk about the glitches, you know, the blank screen I had for a while whilst action was going on underneath, or even the part where a run dialogue box was opened inexplicably, and I, not being the most tech-savvy, was worried I would end up jailbreaking my phone or something, but it just seems overall that the funds were allocated to the nicely presented avatars with nothing else considered. The main bulk of gameplay is setting up squads to attack waves of foes. You upgrade your team to get stronger, yada yada yada, but it really doesn't matter. The battles are very easy and are done in literally seconds. The fact you can automate everything as well means you can just leave it to play in the background. Whilst collecting footage, I ended up zoning out and watching 10 minutes of American Dad whilst the game played in the background. I came back to it, and still, nothing substantial had happened. There are some other modes within the game, like building a base, but the dedicated rooms for each character make it look like a Winx Club web browser hotel sim from the mid-noughties. But of course, there are plenty of monetization options to really get you tapped, with all sorts of in-game currencies and daily unlockables to make you want to keep coming back. But I just don't understand why you would. The gameplay is boring and generic, the features aren't well thought out, and the only thing that's remotely enjoyable are the cinematics, which seem to be glaringly incomplete due to the lack of voice acting. These type of games are not uncommon. In fact, a lot of the App Store are populated with these type of titles, but it's usually with other smaller IPs hoping for a quick cash grab. It's really disappointing that one of the largest comic book houses wanted to churn this out. For a game that was holding off to be released along the new age of the DC revival, this one should have stayed dead, along with the Snyderverse. And there we go, that's all of the 11 available games listed on both the DC Games website and App Store, with some honorable mentions that didn't get included, like the VRSE Batman app and this truly top-tier escape game for Batman, which feels like a mix of the original campy 60s TV show whilst also having a flu fever dream whilst also taking Molly. But let's get to the ranking of the ones that we've just covered. And boom, there we go. Why these in this order? Well, to be brief, starting from the worst to best, Worlds Collide. Absolutely nothing of substance, seems to be all flash and no bang whatsoever. Dark Legion, an interesting concept of a game, but let down majorly by lack of depth and cheap-looking animation in parts. Lego Batman DC Superheroes, good for nostalgia, but not much else happening on screen. Injustice Gods Among Us, looks okay, but a fighting game with limited fighting can't go too far. Superhero Girl Squad Blitz, surprisingly a fun game to play, but loses a few places in the ranking due to its rather predatory monetization model. LEGO Batman Beyond Gotham, an improvement over the previous iteration with more to do and collect, but still feels a little lagging in places. Heroes and Villains, a fun match 3 game with a skin of the DC universe pasted on top, but matching tiles can only go so far. Heroes United, fun in its gameplay, as most Survivor games are, but feels more like a bootleg Batman rather than anything officially tied to the franchise. Batman the Telltale series, an incredibly in-depth and immersive experience that makes you feel like you're there with the bat on the ground. Injustice 2, a marked improvement on the previous title, now with fully movable characters and a reason for playing. And at the top of the list, Batman the Enemy Within takes everything from the first Telltale entry and builds on it, giving what is quite simply the best DC experience a gamer can hope to have. And there we go, folks. That was me playing through and ranking every available DC game on mobile devices. What do you think of the listings? Do you agree with them? Would you have placed them differently? Have I made out that some of them are better or worse than you consider them to be? Let me know in the comments down below. But if you enjoyed this, feel free to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future gameplay and lists. But for now, my friends, luck and more to you all, and catch you next time.